There comes a moment when everything quietly shifts, not with noise, not with revenge, but with clarity. The empath you once saw doubting themselves is no longer seeking approval, no longer reacting, no longer trying to prove their worth. And that's when the narcissist begins to feel something unfamiliar: loss of control. You may not see a battle, but you can feel the tension. Energy is moving, authority is changing hands. What's even more unsettling is this: the empath didn't take power, it was given, chosen, protected, elevated in silence. Many people don't realize this shift is spiritual before it is visible, and by the time others notice, it's already too late to stop. In this video, we're revealing the subtle signs that show why the empath is rising and why the narcissist is failing, not by accident, but by divine design. Stay with me until the end, because the final sign explains why God allows the empath to be tested before being trusted with power. And if any part of this feels familiar, don't just listen. Leave a comment with the word "ready" and quietly claim your growth. Subscribe if you're prepared to recognize the shift before the world does. When the empath stops reacting, it doesn't happen suddenly or dramatically. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, after countless moments of emotional exhaustion. There was a time when every harsh word, every silent treatment, every twisted accusation demanded a response. The empath felt compelled to explain, to defend, to fix what was broken. But something changes when awareness replaces confusion. The empath starts to realize that reacting never brought peace, never brought understanding, and never brought respect. Instead, it fed the chaos. The narcissist thrived on emotional responses, whether they were tears, anger, fear, or endless explanations. Each reaction confirmed control, attention, and importance. When the empath finally understands this, stillness becomes a conscious choice rather than a weakness. This stillness is not indifference, and it is not coldness. It is clarity. The empath is no longer trying to be heard by someone who only listens for advantage. They stop engaging in circular conversations that lead nowhere. They stop responding to provocations designed to pull them back into confusion. Silence becomes a boundary, and calm becomes a shield. What looks like distance on the outside is actually strength forming on the inside. The empath begins to observe rather than absorb, to notice patterns instead of internalizing blame. With each moment of non-reaction, emotional energy is reclaimed. For the narcissist, this shift is deeply unsettling. The familiar tools stop working. Guilt no longer triggers panic. Anger no longer sparks emotional supply. Manipulation meets neutrality instead of resistance. The narcissist may escalate, provoke, or attempt to regain control through charm or intimidation, but the empath no longer takes the bait. Without reaction, there is no fuel. Without fuel, the illusion of power starts to crack. The narcissist feels exposed, confused, and increasingly unstable, not because the empath attacked, but because the empath withdrew emotional access. What many people misunderstand is that this phase is not passive. It requires immense self-control and inner healing. The empath must face uncomfortable emotions without projecting them outward. They must tolerate being misunderstood without rushing to correct the story. They must accept that silence may be judged as weakness by those who depend on noise for dominance. Yet with time, the empath begins to feel lighter. Sleep improves, thoughts become clearer, anxiety fades, the nervous system finally rests. This inner peace becomes noticeable, even if nothing is said out loud. As reactions disappear, discernment sharpens. The empath sees manipulation for what it is, without emotional fog. Decisions are made calmly instead of urgently. Boundaries are enforced naturally, without explanations or threats. The empath no longer feels the need to win arguments because they are no longer fighting for self-worth. This is where true power emerges. Not power over another person, but power over one's own emotional space. In the end, the narcissist loses influence not through confrontation, but through irrelevance. Their words echo without impact. Their tactics fall flat. The empath's stillness becomes the loudest message of all. What once fed chaos now meets calm, and in that calm, control quietly dissolves. Discernment is the turning point where the empath truly begins to see the world clearly, without the haze of confusion or self-doubt. It is not something that appears overnight. It is cultivated through repeated experiences, observation, and reflection. For years, the empath may have questioned their own perceptions, doubted their instincts, or fallen prey to subtle manipulations disguised as concern, charm, or logic. Every word, every gesture, every shift in tone could be dissected, analyzed, and second-guessed. But as discernment sharpens, this fog begins to lift. The empath starts recognizing manipulation almost instantly, before it can take root emotionally or mentally. This newfound clarity changes everything. Where previously the narcissist's words might have triggered guilt, confusion, or fear, now they are met with awareness. The empath no longer internalizes blame or second-guesses themselves. They can see the patterns, the hidden motives, the repeated tactics, the emotional traps without becoming entangled in them. Subtle lies or exaggerations are no longer convincing. Charm and intimidation lose their effect. Every attempt to control or provoke is spotted in real time, and the empath remains unmoved. Sharp discernment also brings freedom. It allows the empath to make decisions based on truth rather than manipulation. They can choose who to trust, where to invest energy, and when to walk away with confidence. Relationships that were once confusing or draining become clear, and the empath can navigate life with greater ease and purpose. The narcissist, sensing this heightened perception, begins to feel their influence slipping. Their usual tactics fail because the empath is no longer reacting blindly, they are responding from insight and awareness. Ultimately, discernment is both shield and compass. It protects the empath from harm while guiding them toward authentic connections and opportunities. With this clarity, the empath moves forward with quiet confidence, no longer vulnerable to deceit and fully aware of the subtle power dynamics around them. What was once a source of manipulation is now seen as inconsequential, leaving the empath stronger, wiser, and increasingly untouchable. There comes a profound moment in the empath's journey when they realize that seeking understanding from everyone is no longer necessary. For years, they may have strained themselves to explain, justify, or prove their intentions, often to those who were unwilling or incapable of seeing the truth. Every misjudgment felt like a personal failure, every misunderstanding a blow to their peace. But at a certain point, something shifts. God removes the need to be understood, and the empath learns to stand strong in their own truth even when others fail to recognize it. This is not arrogance or indifference, it is a deep spiritual protection. The empath becomes comfortable being misjudged because they understand that external validation is not the measure of their worth. They are guided by a sense of divine timing and alignment, knowing that their path is watched over and supported, even when it is invisible to others. They no longer bend to please critics or seek approval from those who drain their energy. Instead, their focus turns inward, toward clarity, growth, and purpose. Being misjudged no longer causes pain. It becomes irrelevant. The empath learns to carry themselves with quiet confidence, aware that protection comes from a higher source. This divine assurance allows them to move freely, make bold choices, and maintain inner peace in situations that would once have provoked anxiety or doubt. They no longer fear judgment or gossip because they understand that the truth of their character and their actions is already witnessed by a power greater than human opinion. For the narcissist, this shift is disorienting. The empath's need for approval or understanding, which was once a lever for control, has vanished. The narcissist's manipulations lose their grip, their accusations fall flat, and their attempts to provoke guilt or insecurity fail entirely. The empath's freedom to exist without seeking validation becomes the ultimate boundary. In the end, when God removes the need to be understood, the empath steps into a space of unmatched strength and protection. They are no longer vulnerable to judgment, no longer tethered to the opinions of those who cannot see them fully, and increasingly aligned with the path they are meant to walk. Misunderstood, perhaps, but completely secure. And that security becomes the foundation for their rise. Control does not always change hands through confrontation. In fact, the most profound shifts often happen without a single argument, without raised voices, and without anyone announcing victory. When control shifts without conflict, it is because the empath has stopped competing for emotional dominance altogether. There was a time when the empath believed strength meant standing their ground in every disagreement, correcting every lie, and defending every boundary with force. But over time, they learned that true control is not taken through struggle. It is released by one person and quietly assumed by another. The empath begins to withdraw from power games they never wanted to play in the first place. They stop explaining their intentions to someone who twists explanations into weapons. They stop reacting to challenges designed to provoke insecurity. By refusing to engage in emotional tug-of-war, the empath steps out of the arena entirely. What remains is calm authority. This calm does not demand attention, yet it commands respect. The empath no longer seeks to control the narcissist, and that is precisely why control begins to move away from the narcissist. For the narcissist, dominance depends on resistance. Control only feels real when it is being tested, fought over, or feared. When the empath stops pushing back, stops pleading, and stops proving, the narcissist is left holding power that no longer functions. Commands fall flat. Threats lose their urgency. Manipulation meets indifference. Without opposition, there is nothing to dominate. The narcissist may sense this shift long before they can explain it. Something feels wrong. The dynamic has changed even though nothing dramatic has happened. What makes this transfer powerful is its natural flow. The empath does not announce new boundaries with force, they live them. They do not demand respect, they embody it. Their choices become quieter but firmer. They invest energy where it is returned and withdraw from spaces where it is drained. Over time, others respond differently to them. Conversations become balanced. Decisions feel self-directed. The empath begins to move through life without waiting for permission or fearing backlash. This is not a rise built on ego, it is a return to self-trust. The empath stops measuring their worth against someone else's reactions. They no longer feel responsible for managing another person's emotions. As emotional independence grows, influence shifts. People sense stability and gravitate toward it. The narcissist, meanwhile, becomes increasingly restless, trying to regain a sense of control that no longer responds to old methods. In the end, control does not disappear, it simply changes location. It moves from manipulation to self-mastery, from domination to discernment. The empath does not fight for dominance because they have outgrown the need for it. And in that quiet evolution, power transfers naturally, without conflict, without noise, and without resistance. Boundaries are one of the quietest yet most powerful ways an empath asserts control over their life, and when they are respected or enforced through distance, they become an unshakable source of strength. For years, the empath may have allowed people, especially narcissists, to cross limits repeatedly, whether it was emotional manipulation, constant demands, or intrusion into personal space. Each violation chipped away at their peace, leaving them drained, anxious, and reactive. But as the empath rises, something changes. Access is no longer freely given, and peace becomes the ultimate priority. This doesn't mean walls are built out of anger or fear. Instead, boundaries are set with calm clarity. The empath begins to discern who deserves their energy and who doesn't, and they act accordingly. For those who ignore limits, distance becomes the natural consequence. It is not punishment, it is preservation. By removing themselves from toxic influence, the empath creates a protective space where emotional energy can be replenished rather than exploited. For the narcissist, this shift is destabilizing. Control depends on proximity, access, and influence. When the empath limits engagement, withdraws attention, or simply removes themselves from draining dynamics, the narcissist feels powerless. Their usual tactics, guilt, charm, or intimidation, no longer work because the empath has claimed the power of choice. The balance begins to tilt, not through confrontation, but through intentional, quiet self-preservation. Over time, these boundaries become second nature. The empath no longer negotiates for permission to feel safe or respected. They simply act in alignment with their needs. Relationships begin to function differently. Interactions are healthier, communication is clearer, and energy is no longer wasted on manipulation or control. The empath learns that peace is not negotiable and that maintaining distance is a form of love for themselves and even for those they no longer allow to overstep. Ultimately, when boundaries are respected or enforced by distance, the empath is not only protecting themselves, but also reclaiming their power. Access is no longer a right granted by others, it is a privilege earned through respect and alignment. Peace becomes the priority, and in that calm authority, the empath rises, while the narcissist's influence quietly collapses. The moment the narcissist loses emotional influence is a turning point in the empath's journey, a subtle but profound shift that signals the collapse of old power dynamics. For years, the narcissist relied on familiar tools, guilt to provoke compliance, fear to control decisions, and charm to manipulate perception. Every reaction from the empath reinforced the illusion of control, feeding the narcissist's sense of dominance and importance. But as the empath grows in self-awareness and strength, these tactics begin to fail. Guilt no longer triggers shame or panic because the empath has learned their worth is not defined by someone else's approval. Fear loses its grip because they have cultivated inner safety and confidence, understanding that intimidation cannot dictate their choices. Charm, which once drew them into emotional traps, is now seen for what it is, a facade designed to manipulate, distract, or exploit. The empath meets these attempts not with anger or resistance, but with calm recognition and detachment. There is no reaction to feed, no energy to drain, and no validation to provide. This loss of influence is deeply unsettling for the narcissist. They are accustomed to emotional compliance. It is their currency, their measure of power. When their usual levers fail, confusion and frustration take over. Their attempts to provoke, persuade, or intimidate feel ineffective, and they may escalate behaviors in desperation, only to meet the same unshakable calm. Each failed attempt erodes their sense of control further, highlighting the growing imbalance of power. For the empath, this is liberating. They are no longer trapped in cycles of manipulation, and their decisions are guided by clarity rather than coercion. Emotional independence has been established, boundaries are respected, and inner authority replaces reaction. The narcissist's influence collapses quietly, but decisively, leaving them exposed, powerless, and increasingly irrelevant. In essence, when guilt, fear, and charm stop working, it is not because the empath seeks to dominate, it is because they have reclaimed their own emotional space. Their power comes from stillness, awareness, and self-trust. The empath rises not through conflict, but through inner strength, and the narcissist, unable to adapt to this shift, quietly loses the emotional grip that once defined their control. As the empath grows in clarity, strength, and self-trust, something remarkable begins to happen. Support starts arriving effortlessly. It's not about chasing validation or seeking help. It is about living in alignment with one's truth. When the empath moves with calm confidence, sets boundaries, and maintains emotional independence, the right people naturally gravitate toward them. Friends, allies, mentors, and even unexpected opportunities appear, drawn by the empath's energy, authenticity, and integrity. At the same time, those who thrive on drama, manipulation, or emotional control begin to fade. Relationships that once drained the empath lose relevance, and the space they leave behind allows healthier, more balanced connections to grow. This attraction is not transactional. It is the natural outcome of energy matching. The empath no longer forces connections, pleads for understanding, or tries to fix others. Instead, they exude a quiet strength that signals reliability, awareness, and inner harmony. People who resonate with this energy feel safe, inspired, and drawn to contribute positively. Conversely, those who thrived on drama, manipulation, or emotional control begin to fade. Relationships that once drained the empath lose relevance, and the space they leave behind allows healthier, more balanced connections to grow. For the narcissist, this shift is alarming. The empath's world becomes populated with people who respect boundaries, honor truth, and value mutual growth, leaving the narcissist increasingly isolated. Their attempts to regain influence fail because the empath's social and emotional environment has been realigned in a way they cannot penetrate. Ultimately, the empath's ability to attract support naturally is both protective and empowering. It replaces old cycles of manipulation with a network of genuine connection, allowing the empath to rise with confidence, stability, and a sense of divine alignment. Right people appear at the right time, and the wrong ones quietly exit, marking a clear, unstoppable shift in influence, energy, and personal power. Confidence grows quietly in the empath's journey, often unnoticed at first, but profoundly felt by anyone around them. It is not loud or boastful, nor is it dependent on recognition or approval from others. Instead, it is rooted in self-trust, clarity, and the inner knowledge that they no longer need to prove themselves. Over time, this quiet confidence begins to radiate naturally, influencing interactions and subtly shifting dynamics without a word being spoken. The empath no longer seeks validation or permission. Decisions are made with calm certainty. Boundaries are maintained effortlessly. Reactions are measured, and energy is directed toward growth rather than appeasement. This change is often most noticeable to the narcissist, who has relied on insecurity, doubt, and emotional turbulence to maintain control. Suddenly, the familiar levers of manipulation stop working. The empath's steady presence, unshaken by provocation or drama, signals a shift in power that the narcissist cannot counter. This quiet growth also strengthens the empath internally. They begin to trust their instincts more, make choices aligned with their highest good, and move with a sense of purpose that feels natural rather than forced. Social interactions, work environments, and personal relationships begin to feel balanced, as energy is no longer wasted on proving worth or defending against manipulation. For those observing from the outside, the empath's confidence may appear subtle, almost understated, but to those who once tried to control or undermine them, it is unmistakable. There is a new aura, calm, firm, and unwavering. The shift does not require confrontation or declaration, it simply exists, growing stronger every day, a quiet testament to resilience and inner authority. Ultimately, this quiet confidence is transformative. It redefines the empath's relationship with themselves and the world, dissolving the narcissist's influence without conflict and allowing the empath to rise steadily, authentically, and undeniably. Divine timing has a way of interrupting old patterns in ways the mind cannot predict, but the heart always understands. For the empath, repeated cycles of manipulation, disappointment, and emotional exhaustion often feel endless. Situations that once repeated themselves, arguments, misunderstandings, betrayals, suddenly begin to shift without warning. There is no fanfare, no announcement, and often no explanation. The break in the cycle is quiet, yet profound, as if a higher power has intervened to realign the flow of events. Old habits, behaviors, and toxic interactions that once seemed unavoidable now lose their grip. The empath finds themselves no longer reacting automatically, no longer trapped in loops of confusion or guilt. Divine timing ensures that the lessons of the past are absorbed and the opportunities of the present are revealed precisely when they are ready to be received. There is a sense of natural order to the change, even if it feels mysterious. Events shift, doors close, and new paths open, often in ways that feel unexpected yet perfectly aligned. For the narcissist, this interruption is disorienting. The familiar patterns they relied upon to maintain influence no longer exist. The empath's predictability, which once allowed manipulation, is gone. The narcissist may search for ways to reclaim control, but the cycles have already broken. Attempts to provoke, charm, or intimidate fall flat because the empath is operating within a new rhythm, guided by a higher timing they cannot influence. This divine intervention does not require action or confrontation from the empath. It is a subtle, spiritual alignment that reinforces growth and healing. Old triggers lose their power, repetitive conflicts dissolve, and energy that was once drained by struggle is now available for clarity, purpose, and empowerment. The empath learns to trust not only themselves, but the timing of the universe, realizing that every interruption is intentional, protective, and perfectly placed to guide them forward. In the end, when divine timing interrupts old patterns, the empath experiences freedom from repetition and control. The cycles that once bound them are broken without apology or explanation, and what emerges is a life marked by clarity, inner strength, and the quiet, unstoppable rise of personal power. The moment the narcissist feels the loss of control is subtle but devastating, and it often comes long before anyone else notices the shift. For years, their sense of power relied on predictability, the predictable reactions, the emotional dependence, the constant need for validation from the empath. Every manipulation, every charm, every attempt to provoke a response reinforced their dominance. But when the empath rises in awareness, sets boundaries, and moves with emotional independence, the narcissist begins to feel something unfamiliar: uncertainty. Confusion replaces certainty, and insecurity starts to take root where dominance once stood. This loss is deeply unsettling because the narcissist's strategies no longer produce the expected results. Guilt no longer compels compliance, fear no longer dictates decisions, and charm no longer elicits submission. Each failed attempt chips away at their illusion of control. They may escalate efforts, try to regain influence, or resort to manipulation tactics with increasing desperation. But the empath no longer reacts in the old predictable ways. The usual power dynamics are collapsing, quietly, invisibly, yet unmistakably. For the empath, this shift is not about revenge, it is about freedom. They are no longer tethered to the narcissist's emotional games. Every moment of calm, every boundary enforced, and every decision made independently reinforces the change in balance. The narcissist, sensing this loss, may act erratically, but their efforts are powerless against the empath's quiet authority. Ultimately, the loss of control transforms the relationship between the empath and the narcissist. Certainty and dominance, once tools of manipulation, are replaced by unpredictability and insecurity. The empath's rise is not announced with drama or confrontation. It is reflected in the narcissist's growing discomfort, their inability to influence, and their fading emotional grip. In this way, the shift is both silent and irreversible, marking the beginning of the empath's true empowerment. There comes a moment in the empath's journey when survival is no longer the driving force behind their choices. For a long time, their decisions were shaped by the need to stay safe, to avoid conflict, or to minimize emotional harm. Every reaction was rooted in self-protection, and every compromise was made to keep the peace. But as healing deepens, something higher begins to take over. Spiritual authority replaces survival mode, and the empath starts leading their life from wisdom rather than wounds. This shift is subtle but powerful. The empath no longer operates from fear, urgency, or emotional exhaustion. They pause before responding. They choose intention over impulse. Past pain no longer dictates present behavior. Instead of reacting from old scars, they respond from insight gained through experience. What once triggered anxiety now invites discernment. What once felt threatening now feels manageable. This is the difference between surviving and leading. Spiritual authority does not seek control over others. It reflects self-mastery. The empath trusts their inner guidance and no longer needs constant reassurance or external validation. Their sense of direction feels grounded, calm, and steady. Decisions are made with clarity, not desperation. Boundaries are enforced without guilt. Silence is used wisely, not defensively. This calm leadership changes how others interact with them, even without words. For the narcissist, this evolution is destabilizing. The empath is no longer operating from wounds that can be exploited. Emotional triggers lose their power. Manipulation has nowhere to attach. The narcissist senses the loss of influence because the empath is no longer navigating life from pain, but from understanding. What once felt like access now feels like distance. Leading from wisdom also brings peace. The empath feels aligned, purposeful, and internally secure. They are no longer fighting old battles or reliving past harm. Their energy is directed toward growth, meaning, and stability. Survival mode fades because safety is no longer sought externally, it is established within. In the end, when spiritual authority replaces survival mode, the empath rises into a new role, not as someone hardened by pain, but as someone shaped by truth. They lead their life with quiet strength, clear vision, and a grounded presence that cannot be shaken because it is built not on wounds, but on wisdom. Pain has a way of shaping us quietly, often in ways we do not understand in the moment. For the empath, experiences of betrayal, manipulation, or emotional exhaustion can feel unbearable at the time. Every hurt, every disappointment, and every moment of confusion seems like a setback, a test they never asked for. Yet, over time, a higher perspective emerges. God uses that pain not to punish, but to prepare. What once left scars now becomes a source of strength, insight, and purpose. The lessons learned through hardship sharpen the empath's discernment. They begin to recognize patterns they once overlooked, see motives they once missed, and understand the deeper dynamics at play in relationships and situations. Pain teaches patience, clarity, and emotional independence. Each trial strengthens their ability to set boundaries, maintain calm, and act from wisdom rather than reaction. What once drained energy now becomes a reservoir of insight. Purpose emerges alongside discernment. The empath starts to see that their experiences were not random, but necessary steps in growth. Hardship is reframed as training for resilience and self-mastery. Decisions are no longer influenced by fear or manipulation. They are guided by understanding and divine alignment. The pain that once felt isolating now connects the empath to a higher sense of direction and meaning. For the narcissist, this transformation is threatening. The empath, once vulnerable to influence, is now armed with awareness and clarity. The old tactics of guilt, fear, or charm fail because the empath's insight has been forged in the crucible of past challenges. The narcissist senses the loss of control, but the empath moves forward with confidence and purpose. Ultimately, when God uses pain as preparation, the empath emerges stronger, wiser, and more aligned with their path. What hurt deeply in the past now serves as the foundation for discernment, resilience, and a life guided by intention rather than circumstance. The scars become evidence not of weakness, but of readiness, marking the empath's rise with quiet, unstoppable power. At a certain point in their journey, the empath realizes that chasing closure is no longer necessary. For years, they may have sought explanations, apologies, or resolutions from those who caused pain, believing that understanding would bring relief. They replayed conversations, analyzed intentions, and tried to make sense of actions that often had no reasonable explanation. But over time, the empath begins to see that closure is not something others can give. It is something that comes from within. Peace replaces the need for answers. This shift is subtle but profound. The empath no longer feels compelled to convince someone to admit wrongdoing or to repair what was broken. They stop waiting for validation, acknowledgement, or reconciliation. Instead, they focus on their own healing, self-respect, and growth. The energy that was once spent chasing explanations is redirected toward inner calm and purposeful action. By letting go of the need for external resolution, the empath reclaims their emotional power. For the narcissist, this change is destabilizing. The empath no longer reacts to manipulative attempts at guilt or persuasion, and there is no longer an expectation to fix the broken dynamic. The narcissist may try to provoke, charm, or justify, but the empath no longer engages. Their influence wanes, and their attempts at control fail because the empath has stopped seeking their approval or acknowledgement. Ultimately, when the empath stops chasing closure, they step into true freedom. Peace becomes the guiding force, and the need for answers fades into irrelevance. They learn that understanding is not always necessary, and that letting go is the most powerful form of resolution. In this quiet release, the empath rises with confidence, clarity, and an unshakable sense of self, while the narcissist's control quietly dissolves. The rise of an empath is rarely dramatic in the way people expect. It does not arrive with loud proclamations, sudden confrontations, or visible displays of power. Instead, it begins quietly, internally, long before anyone else becomes aware of it. By the time others notice the change, the shift is already complete, and the transformation has been silently unfolding for weeks, months, or even years. The process starts with awareness, recognizing patterns, understanding one's emotional triggers, and reclaiming energy that was once drained by manipulation, drama, or constant emotional labor. This internal work is invisible from the outside, yet it is the foundation for all that follows. The empath begins to reassess their relationship with themselves and with the world around them. They start by noticing where they have allowed others to hold control over their emotions and decisions. They examine old cycles of interaction, relationships where guilt, fear, or charm dictated their responses, and begin to interrupt those patterns internally. This is not an immediate or simple process. It requires patience, introspection, and self-compassion. The empath must confront uncomfortable truths about dependency, codependency, and the subtle ways they allowed others' behavior to shape their sense of worth. In doing so, they reclaim control over their inner world. Internal rise is also about mastering emotional responses. The empath learns to observe feelings without immediately reacting, to witness manipulation without being ensnared, and to set mental and emotional boundaries that protect their energy. This is where the true transformation begins. The empath's confidence, discernment, and spiritual authority grow in ways that are completely independent of external validation. They do not announce this growth, they embody it silently. Every decision, every pause, every calm response becomes evidence of an internal power that no longer needs to be proven. As this internal rise progresses, the narcissist begins to notice subtle changes, though they cannot fully understand them. The empath's reactions are no longer predictable. Emotional triggers fail to produce the desired effect. Boundaries are enforced naturally and without drama. There is no reaction to provoke, no energy to exploit, and no validation to drain. The narcissist may attempt to escalate, charm, or manipulate, but the empath has already shifted their foundation internally. From the outside, it may appear as though nothing has changed, yet the power dynamic has already reversed. The narcissist feels instability and loss of control long before anyone else notices the empath's growth. This internal transformation is also deeply spiritual. The empath begins to trust their intuition more, recognizing that guidance comes from within and from a higher source. They no longer rely on others to validate their worth or to define the limits of their abilities. Past experiences that once felt like failures or betrayals are now understood as preparation for this moment. The empath's patience, empathy, and wisdom are strengthened through these challenges, allowing them to navigate life with quiet authority. By the time people around them see the changes, calm confidence, discernment, independence, it is too late for external forces to disrupt the rise that has already taken place internally. Another crucial aspect of the internal rise is the shift from reaction to intentional action. The empath begins to choose where to invest energy, who to allow into their life, and how to respond to challenges. This is not about seeking power over others, but about reclaiming personal sovereignty. By the time the external world registers the change, the empath has already mastered their own emotional landscape. They no longer chase closure, they no longer seek permission, and they no longer allow manipulation to dictate their path. This internal authority becomes a magnet for positive energy, support, and alignment with opportunities that reflect their true self. In essence, the rise that happens internally first is both invisible and unstoppable. It is a quiet revolution within the empath's mind, heart, and spirit. By the time others see the calm confidence, the clear boundaries, and the assertive independence, the internal work that made it possible is already complete. No external drama or conflict is needed to announce this transformation. It exists fully in the empath's presence, energy, and choices. Ultimately, this internal rise is a testament to resilience, self-mastery, and divine alignment. The empath has learned to lead from wisdom rather than wounds, to trust their inner guidance, and to move through life with clarity and purpose. By the time others notice, the shift is no longer a process, it is a reality. The empath has risen, quietly, fully, and irrevocably, embodying a power that is unshakable because it was built from within.